I'm joined now by Nick Karambelas. He's a founding partner of a law firm specializing in international business. He's also part of the legal counsel for the American Hellenic Institute. Thanks so much, Nick, for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, what do you consider some of the biggest takeaways from this meeting this year?
Well, the biggest takeaway is, of course, the currency, finding there's no currency manipulation. I think that was a very, very important point because that would add another dimension if it were happening to the whole trade issue between the United States and China, because the trade policy is bound up as three interrelated issues: the taking of intellectual property issue, and then the tariff issue, and then the currency manipulation. Well, they're all interrelated. And I'm listening to the ambassador talk about he's confused about what's going on. The confusion is over objectives, because at some point all of these things have to mesh to get down to commerce.
Right, and you touched on this. Of course, this China-U.S. trade war is a big issue there. As we saw earlier, Christine Lagarde said it could be detrimental to global economic growth. How bad do you think it could get?
Well, I look at things from a historical perspective, and sometimes when we do that, we can get very pessimistic about how bad it can get. I think in many ways, though, it's going to be by sectors, and it's not going to affect everybody in the same way. And the different sectors of the global economy will seek their own remedies, and those remedies will have an effect that we can't even think about now. For example, when in dealing with the tariffs issue, there's a procedure long in practice called misclassification on the codes of imported materials, some of which have tariffs, or some don't, or they're lower. Well, what is the effect of that? What happens when that happens? So.
Yeah, it's a very complex issue.
Yes.
Let's move on now to another topic that was discussed: extreme poverty. The World Bank Group says the global poverty rate is actually the lowest in recorded history. So good news there. Yet we often hear about this growing divide between rich and poor, this gap. So how do you account for those two things?
I think it is, once again, a historical misallocation of resources, misallocation of educational resources. And I was buoyed, of course, by those statistics. And I think we're at 50% or now more in middle class, but that leaves 50% poor. And I think that divide is, I believe it may increase if, with these issues are not resolved, about what we were just discussing.
A lot of issues affecting a lot of people around the world.
Very much so.
Nick Karambelas, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for your perspective.